Welcome back to the Davis Academy of Music. In today's lesson, I want to talk to you about harmony and chords. Well, what is harmony? We've already looked at melody, and we looked at what it takes to write a good melody. So I want to look at what it takes to write a good harmony. Well, harmony is the support for the melody. So if you think of a melody, we're talking about a single line. It could be sung, it could be played on an instrument, but it's typically a single line. So harmony is going to support the melody. Now, typically what that means is it's going to be in the background or in the middle ground. Harmony is not going to be in the foreground. Typically the most important element of the music is going to be the melody. It's where our ears are drawn to. And so when we're writing harmony, we don't want to write something that's competing with the melody, where there's going to be a lot of cognitive dissonance. So keep that in mind as you're writing your harmony. Let's take a look at this melody. I've written this real quick in 2/4. And again, a melody is just this one single line. Of course, I've started and ended in C major here. So we can write at the very bottom C, M4, C major, just to help ourselves remember what it is. Now, when we're looking for a harmony, again, we want to support the melody. So we first have to analyze the melody to see what's going on. So oftentimes when I'm setting up a score, what I like to do is use a grand staff for this, because if you use only a treble clef, you're not going to have any place to write the harmony. Now, in the standard tradition, the harmony goes in the left-hand part or the bottom part, and the melody goes in the top part. That's not always true. There's, of course, some melodies that are written low and some harmonies that are written higher, but typically, especially if you're writing for piano, the octave from about C3, maybe C2 to C4, chords sound really good in that octave. If you get too low, chords tend to sound muddy. And if you get too high, they tend to die away too fast. That's usually why a lot of composers in history have chosen to put their chords or their harmony in the left hand. Now, harmony could just be one note. It doesn't have to be a full chord. And of course, we'll look at chords in a later lesson. But for now, we're going to look at some kind of a harmony. Now, in terms of a harmony, we want to make something that is, well, harmonious, which means it sounds good with the melody. So let's take a look at the melody. In this measure, what we want to do is look at all of the notes. We have a C, a B, an A, and a G, starting here. C, B, A, and a G. Well, that's kind of a scale-like passage. It's like starting on tonic with a C and then walking down C, B, A, G. So it's kind of interesting because we have to think of, well, if we have 4 different notes in our melody, how are we going to pick a note to harmonize with 4 different notes? Well, it is a tough question, and it's something that you'll have to think about. Well, one of the things you can think about is there's a series of strong and weak beats in every meter. So in 2/4, the strongest beat is going to be beat number 1. And that's true for all of these measures, that the strongest beat is going to be beat number 1. So what does that mean? It means that our ear is going to hear beat number 1, the first beat, which we call the downbeat. It's going to see that as the strongest pulse. And that means that we want to harmonize that note the most importantly. Or we want to harmonize that note most importantly. So that in this context is going to be a C. So we have to pick a note that's going to sound good with a C. Well, of course, for our harmony, we could pick a C and harmonize it just with a C. Or we could pick an E that would harmonize well, or we could pick a G. So any third, any fourth away from that note, or a fifth or a sixth is going to sound good. Seconds, tritones, and sevenths are not going to sound really good in terms of making a beautiful harmony. So stay away from seconds, the tritone, or major and minor sevenths. These are the things that you want to try to stay away from if you're trying to make a harmony, because if you have a C and then a B right next to it, it's going to clash. There's not going to be a clear harmony. So the ones that you want to, or the intervals that you want to look for, again, are going to be thirds, major or minor, fourths, fifths, and sixths. So thirds of any type, fourths, fifths, and sixths. Of course, you want to try to avoid harmonizing with the tritone. Okay. So it could be a C, you could harmonize it with an E, or a G, or even an A. Those would all work. Now, in terms of the second measure, we want to do the same thing. We want to take a look at what are the notes in the second measure. Again, we have a C here, then we have a D, we have an E, and then next we have an F. So we really have the same pattern, except instead of a descending scale, this time we have an ascending scale. So what that means, again, is that we're going to have a C on the strongest beat, and then the second beat of the measure is the second strongest beat. So we want to try to pick a note that harmonizes with both of those. So we could pick, again, another C, or again, we could, this time, maybe we want to make it more interesting, so we'll pick an E, that could work. Or we could pick a G, that could work as well. What we'd want to do is stay away from a D or an F, because if you started the measure with a D, it's going to be clashing against that C on the strong beat. Now, it will sound good when we get to this next note, the D here. A D against a D will sound good, but that initial C against a D would sound really inharmonious. So we want to pick something that's harmonious or congruent with that first pitch. Now let's look at the third measure here. We've got a G, and then another G, and then an A, and a B. So we have a G here, and then an A on the second strong B. Well, those are a second away, so those are going to be clashing, but since we have two G's and a B, we probably want to pick something that's going to be harmonious with the G and the B. Since a G and a B is a major third, either of those tones are going to sound good together. So we could write a G, or we could write a B. Now, since we're going up, I think it'd be really good to write that G there. And of course, this last measure ends with a C, so we only have one note to harmonize, and that is a C. So we could just harmonize it with a C. Or again, if we wanted to harmonize it with a third, a fourth, fifth, or a sixth, you could do that as well. Now, of course, you have to make the decision because you are the songwriter, you are the composer. So you have to decide what you're going to harmonize it with. If it's the end of a piece, oftentimes you want to harmonize it with something that's going to sound conclusive, which is going to be the home key, like C in this case. If it's not the end, maybe you don't want it to sound so conclusive, so you'll harmonize it with more of an unstable tone, like an E or a G or something like that. That's going to be the third or the fifth of the scale degrees. So thinking about where you are in the song is also really important. Oftentimes I have students that will try to end the song. In other words, they'll end on a very strong cadence or a very strong ending after the first phrase or the second phrase. And typically if we do that, if we have too many strong cadences after every phrase, it feels like the piece is constantly ending. So we want to be careful not to have a really strong ending after every single sentence, or else it's just going to feel like the piece never got started and it's always ending. So sometimes you can actually use, to your advantage, unstable harmonies to keep the energy going. So you can use an E here as your harmony against a C. That way the next measure can feel a little bit more resolved, and it doesn't feel like you ended in measure 4. So this is a lecture all about harmony. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in this lesson. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and let me know if you've got any questions or any other topics you want to specifically address. I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching.